Welcome to the Tone Jerks podcast. I'm your host, Brian Gower, and my normal co-host, Kyle McIntyre. He is not here. He is on vacation. But do not worry. I had three good friends to help me out this week. I had Adam Rohr from the Let 'Em Hear podcast. I had Kevin Equitz from Equitz Guitars and Sean Wright from Lollygagger Effects. All decided to help a brother out. We tackled different topics, and episodes ran a little longer than I expected, but that's good. We got into some good conversation. So instead of having like an almost 2 hour long podcast, we're going to split it up. So have 3 episodes. So enjoy this one, and there's 2 others to go on to make this a complete episode number 47. On the line here, I have Mr. Kevin Equitz. Do you want to say hi to the people?
Hey guys.
All right. So in case you don't know Kevin, in case you've been living under a rock, Kevin, he builds guitars. His company's called Equitz Guitars, and it's really like as like cool boutique handmade guitars as you can get, I think. So they're really cool shit. He's got a lot of stuff. So I mean, we'll get a little bit into the background, but we're mainly just gonna hit a couple topics. If you wanted nitty gritty about Kevin, I'd say go to Tone Mob, Guitar Knobs, listen to all those guys. You can get more nitty gritty about Kevin. But Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Like kind of like what's your deal? What's in a Cliff Notes version? What is Equitz Guitars? Who are you?
Equitz Guitars is a dude in his garage making guitars. That's really it. And that's kind of all it needs to be for me right now. It's a side gig, and it's about I think 5 guitars a year is my average, but fortunately there's a list going on right now, so I need to ramp it up. I need to kind of make some changes, I guess, to my process, my tooling, whatever, and so that's a good thing. And in the boutique realm, it's a good problem to have. Yeah, it's a good problem to have, but it's not always a guarantee either. So just for each one, it's very cool. I'm very thankful, and they're all really good people. And if there's one thing I could say is it's never just the guitar. For me, the process is so much fun. Even before, it's like the term breaking ground, but it's like making sawdust. Like before a tool hits wood and sawdust is created, like there's been a lot that's gone on up until that point, and then the whole process of seeing the thing get built, as you can attest to, Brian, the owner is a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They get to kind of see it from my perspective, the stuff that I feel comfortable showing. If I make a mistake, be like, oops, I screwed. But there have been times where I'll tell somebody like, hey, I screwed up, I'm going to redo this part, just because I want them to know that it's a process, and that it doesn't just happen. Even the shops that have more automation and stuff, like there's still a lot that goes into each guitar. So anyway, at the end of it, we feel like we've been through an experience together, and it feels like the friendships that I've made just through building guitars for people is really deep. It's very fulfilling. Like, it's a lot of fun, and it's a great kind of pocket for me right now to do them. Originally, it was like, 1 at a time, then it was 2 at a time. So I've been trying to batch them in groups of like 3 to 4 to try to get through the list without that impacting the overall timeline too much. So little by little, I'm getting there.
No, it's definitely cool. Your designs are very, they're all unique, like designs. You're not doing like Les Paul LP telecopies or T-styles or whatever. You're doing your own designs. You came up with something that's like really, they're all classic looking, like they have that classic look. And not to say like, it harkens back to like, this is a Gretsch. It's like, it's your own style.
Right.
And
the idea of them being totally original doesn't sit well with me. It feels like it's an original arrangement of familiar lines.
Yeah.
It's almost like a mashup of like some cover tunes, so you could call the song original, but you're taking a bunch of others, melodies or chord progressions or riffs that people already like. They're already conditioned and they like them.
It's the things that you like, and that kind of helped build who you are as like a player or like in design, that you actually like and harken back to. So you can be like, oh, it's cool. I'm not like ripping off, NSG or whatever, but I'm like, oh, I'm maybe taking lines that I enjoy out of this thing. So.
Right. Cause we've all seen them. It's the stuff that they make fun of on other podcasts about, ugly guitars and, things that look like a joke, because it's easy to make an original shape, but just because it's original doesn't mean it's appealing.
Yeah. And just because it's original doesn't mean it's good. It's just like music.
Exactly. Well, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, in your case too, you could come up with anything, any sort of noise, and call it original.
Yeah.
Right. But
ain't nobody gonna want to listen to it.
Right.
Nobody's gonna be booking your band, or nobody's gonna want to play the guitars. So that's really cool. So yeah, it's something. I think you're building something up in a reputation as like a builder who gives a shit, and you're doing it so by hand. And that's like, if you're looking for that, you can get it out of Equitz. You're not really gonna get it out of like, even I'm sure Fender Custom Shop or Gibson Custom Shop, but you're gonna be paying like through the teeth for that, just for that name sake. And
yeah,
it's still going to be, I think, pretty automated to me.
Well,
I don't know. That is worth a damn, just to say like somebody made this.
Well, and those brands have a place. There are people that make those guitars and all that. And if there's anything I could really push, not just me, but the idea of, there are a lot of other builders like me. They're doing the same thing, kind of in their own way. So, in my opinion, the bigger brands, they've got a range, as far as like, beginner, intermediate, even some expert level players. But if you get to the point where you want to invest in something that it's a long-term decision, not something to flip or anything like that, any short-term idea, but you want something that's going to, last longer than you will and maybe be handed down somewhere or whatever. There's so many guys out there, and ladies too, I shouldn't just say guys, but there are a lot of people out there that really are passionate about, making these things that for a comparable price point to those bigger brands like their custom shops, like you could get something that is much more unique and tailored to you, and you can be part of the process as well.
I think I don't know, there's something to be said in that, and especially the time that we're living in. And, people want to say like, oh, the digital age is pushing people apart. I'm like, no, it's bringing people closer together. I think that
right.
Like, especially what we're doing right fucking now. we're like 180 miles, whatever, 80 to 100 miles away. And we're talking right now about guitars. I'm like, it's really cool that we can have that connection. And I think you can have that connection with somebody building your guitar like across the country,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so it's really cool. I mean, any more that you want to know about Equitz, like I said, check out this podcast, check out his website. But I wanted to hit a topic. What do you say about that, Kevin?
Yeah,
I wanted to pick your brain about something. So I had one. So this is not necessarily about guitars or music, but you're a creative person. You're designing, musical instruments. You're a musician yourself. And part of your career is, your day job, is you're designing graphics, graphic design. You're part of that. You're creating stuff all the time. So for me, I wanted to pick your brain about what do you do? Like, how do you deal with getting out of a creative rut? Like, if you find yourself in one, how do you get out of it? Do you have like success stories?
Probably.
or do you like have like a go-to, I think is the thing.
Yeah. My go-to idea is to pull the rug out from underneath yourself. Right. And for a long time with a lot of people, they've heard me talk about, like simplifying and trying to avoid like option paralysis and whatnot. Yeah. But just recently, my wife's been doing a lot of painting, right? She's gotten into watercolor. Mm-hmm. And, so she's got there at one point she had just these palettes out, like multiple palettes and just tons of colors on all these palettes. And it kind of went against what I'd previously felt about like surrounding yourself with options. Because you can confuse yourself, and having more options often leads to more options for regret. If you have 100 things and you choose one out of the 100, you have 99 variables of like, well, should I have gone with that other one? Yeah. It's easier to decide between 3 things, right?
Yeah.
However, like watching her work, it's like she has an idea and a better understanding of all those colors. So more colors gives her more flexibility. So maybe it's a matter of choosing the right options. But what I really meant about pull the rug out from underneath yourself is like, it's not any one solution. Like the designers that I work with on my team, you know, different designers kind of have a different style and a different preference. And so a lot of times it's like, you can see them starting to work themselves down one direction. It's like, okay, hey, why don't we take it apart and put it back together? Or we'll look at something upside down. We'll put it on the wall upside down. And it's like, what stands out? How does it look, you know, this way? Let's try to subtract 3 things from this. Not ultimately necessary. And from like, you know, just the design education, the 3 words, and it's on my wall. It's appeal, comprehension, and retention. And that's what, whether it's a guitar, whether it's a song, anything that is created, in my opinion, should fall into those 3 criteria. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by pulling the rug out from underneath yourself is like, if you're the type of person, let's put it in the context of guitar, for example, like my brother and I are very different players. He's very technical. He started off learning scales, and scales turned into like sweep picking, and he's very fast, very technical player. And so that our personalities are different. And so I kind of went in a different direction, more like sloppy blues and, you know, surf music and stuff like that. But it's been interesting to kind of see, because we play together quite a bit. And when we play together, it's usually like cover tunes. We have this family kind of band get together thing that we do every now and then. We play a bunch of cover tunes, and seeing how that kind of pulls us out of our own approaches is an interesting comparison, I think. And for me to try to practice the way he does with like a metronome and scales, that really pulls and pushes me in the right directions. And in his case, I think maybe looking at a solo or a, you know, a chord progression out of the context of like how technically sound it is, you know, but like how does it feel? I think that's like an interesting push to kind of see how we can meet in the middle on that. And so in the interest of like, you know, trying to create obstacles for yourself to climb, it's like a matter of how do you already practice? Like if you practice by plugging into your amp, then unplug your guitar, you know, change it on yourself. Mm-hmm. Or if you never play plugged in, plug that sucker in. Like that's how I am. Like I would usually play unplugged. And so to like plug in my effects, my amp, and to feel really conspicuous, like, man, somebody can hear me right now. Like that changes how I practice. Mm-hmm. If you're someone who's only playing solos, it's like, stop, you know, like play some chord progression.
Get the rhythm going and get in the pocket. Yeah. Right.
And there have been things other people that I've seen, it's like, you know, take 2 strings off your guitar, just any 2, just pick them, just take them off. Or, you know, try to live within a few different frets, or, you know, it's a matter of recognizing what you are and changing it. It sounds really obvious, but I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do it. And so it's not a matter of confusing yourself with more options, like, oh, I need more pedals and I need more of this. So it's like, well, if you're already doing that, then getting deeper into it isn't going to help. It's just changing the game on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think this is something that you mentioned recently on Adam's podcast, Let Him Hear. How I think you had mentioned something about, you know, you try and create like a creative, artistic environment for your daughter.
Right.
So I think that's kind of a cool thing. I was like, oh, you were saying like, oh, if she's ever frustrated with something or whatever, you know, you could just go create something. I think that is something like when you're in a different mindset, that can really spark creativity and maybe even get you out of a rut. And, you know, say if you're like frustrated with this guitar part that you can't get with, well, then write lyrics or, you know, write a new song. Like, you know, say like you can't figure out this solo for, you know, a song in A major, then, you know, go work on the next song that's in D minor, whatever. It could be like whatever, or just write something new. I'm like, and the thing is, or, you know, you could step away and I'm like, okay, lyrics are completely different than guitar, in my opinion. You know, it's like when you're writing lyrics, I'm like, oh, I don't have to get frustrated about guitar. So I think that's kind of a really cool idea.
Right. And see, the lyric thing, that's something I've probably never done. So even songwriting in and of itself is not, quite honestly, I don't really feel like much of a creative person. That's my job, is working with creative people. And I'm surrounded by it. So I mean,
I like how you say that, but you build and come up with designs for guitars. I'm not a creative person, and you're like shaving this thing down with your fucking hands. I'm like, I can't create anything, but you're creating something tangible that people actually use. Anyways, go on.
But that's more like a byproduct of like the catharsis of, you know, shaving the wood down. You know what I mean? Like it's, you know, like those you know, like ants that make these tunnels. They're just making a tunnel, but then when you look at the whole matrix of tunnels, and it's this wonderful, like, you know, organic structure, it's like they're just making a tunnel. Like I'm just gonna cut away at a piece of wood until it feels like a guitar. And but there's some people that like they have this outlet, like there's this fountain within them that just needs to burst out. And so going through art school and you know, working with design and working with artists and stuff, there are a lot of people that are like just super creative, and it's like they just need to focus it and point it in the right direction. And, you know, where other folks are more it's more of like an absorption kind of thing.
Yeah,
or
it's more like I get like a I don't know. I can't think of the right word, but it's like utilitarian. It's like, oh, I'm creating now. And it's like, I'm segmenting my creativity into its pocket. So it's like, it's not any different than the person that you are saying, like, this spewing out creativity. I'm like, for you, you might just like see yourself as a person. I'm like, oh, I'm only doing this because this is kind of what I know. I'm robotronic. But you're actually doing something that you got to think of. Like, there's a lot of human beings in the world that don't create anything. And you're you're doing something. You're cultivating this environment, especially for your daughter, the next generation. You know, she's frustrated. She's going to create something good, or it's or it could be just something that she's like, cool, I did that, and I'm just going to throw it away. Whatever, I drew something, I'm whatever, and then but she's doing something with her energy as opposed to just being pissed off. And anyways.
Right, and that was the thing where because guitars for me is like the big difference for everything else. And like, that's where I do feel most creative. That's where I actually finish a project is, you know, like it's the anti-Kevin, which is very strange. But, you know, in her case, you know, our daughter, her name's Bridget. Bridget's like super creative. She loves writing. She's really good at writing these stories, and she'll write like a few chapters and then abandon it. And it's like, no, keep going. So, you know, trying to get her to finish the project. And I think part of this rut that we're talking about too can be like how precious something is. Like my wife had a painting teacher who would make a painting and then literally just scratch it off of the canvas and paint it again, as like a practice of separating yourself from like, no, I can't let it go, you know? Or in the other case, there are some people that, you know, their work is completely disposable. And it's like, well, maybe consider the longer term thing. So as far as, you know, in Bridget's case, like there was one particular instance, she was just mad about something else, and she had this this cool, it was like a I forget what the drawing was, but she ripped it up. She was frustrated, and she ripped up her drawing, and it was like, oh, darn it, like you didn't have to rip that up. And so we're trying to say, instead of destroying, like you should be using this energy to create. And so she took all those little pieces and like glued and taped them back together and made this really cool looking bird out of this drawing that she had torn up. And it was a nice little object lesson of like, see what you can do. You can use your energy one way or the other. And I think part of that conversation with Adam and Emily was like, nowadays too, maybe it's another, you know, something that's facilitated by our social interactions, but you can spend all your energy complaining and griping and frustrating and arguing and, you know, doing all that. It's like, but there's so many people out there with their particular sphere is, you know, songwriting or, you know, painting or whatever it is. And it's like, just create with that instead of destroying with that. Don't try to destroy a person. Don't try to, you know, just create and hopefully more good would come from that.
I think it's, partially putting those feelings that you have to like good use. Not necessarily like, you know, stifling any.
Right.
Now, this is where I guess I'm not a parent. So for me, I'm like, if you're angry and you have, sadness, rage, any of like the negative connotations to like feelings, I'm like, feel them, live them.
Yeah.
You're human. There's a lot of people that never get to feel what you're feeling right now. So embrace it, but then create something from it. So don't feel I'm frustrated. I shouldn't feel frustrated anymore. I'm like, no, feel frustrated and angry.
Right.
And, if you, are mad and at something, I'm like, good, then do something from it. Like, for me, I write music when I'm like, the latest one that we just did, it was like every emotion I felt at a certain time in my life, it was like not the best time of my life, but it came out with a record. And I'm like, oh, right. I'm like pretty happy-go-lucky now. I'm a little too complacent in how shitty my life is, but I look at it back in a time when I was like, you know what? I was, everything was going wrong and I was happy. I was angry. I was mad. I was like, I was, pushing everybody else away. And I'm like, I wrote a record from that and I learned from it. I became something,
Right. And that's what we were working on with Bridget. We've had to say it many times, as, I think most parents can attest to with kids, but we tell her, like, you can be angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry. You just can't be mean. Yeah. Right. like you were saying, feel the feelings, but
don't, and, you don't have to inflict those on other people. And that's the biggest thing. Because there's a fine line between being like, a person feeling emotions and being a prick.
Exactly.
Oh, those are my words, not yours. I don't see you telling your daughter, like, just don't be a fucking prick, okay?
Right.
This guy Brian told me to say that to you.
But I mean, and this may be like weirdly abstract, but like what I've noticed, what I'm doing in the garage, and it arose from this campaign we were working on at my last day job, where they wanted to use tools symbolically, and it was like, well, there was really no negative connotation we could avoid by, a hammer, screwdriver, nails, like everything was so like violent when you break it down. Yeah. And it made me realize too, it's like when for me, my personal example, when I look at a finished guitar, like it goes through a series of just horrible, violent operations. It's cutting, it's grinding, and then thinking about that show, like how it's made, just because that's another thing that fascinates me, is just to see how stuff is built industrially and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But it's like nothing really is ever built without being like stretched or pressed or heated or cut
broken down. Yeah,
right, exactly. And so to look at like songwriting and even just classical art and all this kind of stuff, like, generally speaking, obviously there'd be some exceptions, but for the most part, like the best art comes from anger, frustration, pain. What we would associate these negative things. There is good stuff that can be like, hey, I'm happy, I'm going to write a song about it. Obviously there's good stuff to be gained there. And, we really try to surround Bridget with, we'd make her playlists of, real positive music that had, it wasn't cheesy or, corny music, but it just had had a good message to it. But like in your case, you're talking about your album, it's like, that you took a negative circumstance and you just created something with it. The album, I've heard it, it's got that energy, and it's, you can hear kind of what you were feeling, but there's something there. And someday you'll be on the opposite end of those feelings, if you're not already, and you'll look back and that'll be like a marker of, that point in your life. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion.
Yeah. And yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's why I look back on it now. I'm like, no, I'm not sad like that anymore. And I look at it like, ooh, but these are good songs though. At least got some good songs.
And then, but it's good to know how upset you were. Yeah. Or and what made you that way.
Especially able to like document something like that and like create something tangible that people can listen to and like. But I guess to back on like creative rut, I had a point of like sometimes like, just not only like just separating yourself entirely from things, but like sometimes just doing that. Like I notice like my mind kind of sparks something that I'm like, I'll be doing something completely different. Like I'll be like, oh, I might be like driving and like I could be like, oh, I'm listening to a podcast, but then I thought of like lyrics or like a chord progression. Like, I could do it. And so, I mean, like an idiot, I'll like write down something while I'm driving. But
that's a good point too.
Don't recommend that. Yeah. But yeah. Or I could be like on a run or jog or something.
Right. There's something that happens when you are kind of available to an idea, because the ideas aren't going to wait for you. A lot of times, people talk about getting good ideas in the shower or like when they're starting to fall asleep. That's some people keep a notepad by their bed. Like Victor Wooten, the bass player, was talking about when you're starting to get into that kind of half dream state. It's like when your brain can relax a little bit, sometimes there's a good idea that creeps in there. So I think making yourself available or having the resources around, like there are lists on my phone of guitar ideas, and none of them born in my garage working on another guitar. It was like as I'm, one place or another in the car, you hear a song and it's like, oh, that's a good idea for a guitar. And as a songwriter, as a lyricist, I'm sure, you could, if you kind of, can get yourself into a space where you're not distracted by anything else, there's some interesting ideas that are at least given a runway to land on.
Yeah, definitely. That's, I don't know, sometimes too, I'm like, even just like recently, it's just like if you can get rid of the barrier to entry to creativity is another thing too. Like for me, I've like gotten like trying to streamline my recording process to be like, if I have an idea, I just want to be able to plug in, turn it on, and just record. And like that helps out too, because I'm like, I don't have to worry about like running cables and miking up a cab and doing this and da da da. I'm like, I can just kind of plug in here and just start playing. And so anything that's like disassociated with, or anything that's like not associated with the actual creative process, you can get that out of the way, then that's cool.
Yeah, and it's tough because in a perfect world, you should be able to do any of this stuff whenever it occurs to you. But as like in school, there was a very visible divide between the commercial artists and the fine artists. And the fine artists were like, I have this vision in this direction and I don't need to get paid for it. I just need to express it. Whereas the commercial artists were almost, and I know I'm over polarizing this, but the commercial artists were like, I don't care what you want. I'll create it for you and I'll get paid for it. And so there's a balance to be struck in between those two as far as having like some integrity of your own vision, but also knowing that there are points where you do have to turn it on and off. And so the more agile you are as far as like storing some ideas and being able to act on those ideas with, an informed like amount of skill and whatnot, it's a valuable intersection to have, because if you've booked studio time and the wheels are turning and cash is being spent, like you do need to be creative right now, then and there. Yeah.
And then I think it's cool too. It's like it's kind of almost like too, you have to like learn the techniques and learn the craft too to be able to know when to turn it on and off. And that is unfortunate.
It's not in your way.
Yeah, because it's like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that's like, oh man, I got all these song ideas. I'm like, for us, I know we see it a lot that these people think they're so fucking creative. I'm like, I'm a lyricist, man. I got all these lyrics. I'm like, yeah, but you can't sing in time. You can't sing in key. You don't know how to write a song. I'm like, nobody's going to want to back you up. It's a waste of everybody's time. I'm like, you don't have any of the skills to back it up, but as creative as you are, you're going to be the next big thing. Nobody wants to work with you. You're just a piece of garbage. And there's people who like talk a big game. And the thing is, I'm like, you have to be able to back it up too. So that's for me as like creating, you have to like kind of, cut your teeth a little bit and like learn your trade, learn your craft. Even though like for me, I'm like, I'm playing guitar and not like I'm getting paid for it. It's like I got to put out a crappy record and pay money to put it out.
That was something I saw in art school too, where forgive me if this offends anyone, but the idea of, well, that's my style, like as an excuse. It's like, oh, my style is to be sloppy and unpredictable, and that's just how I express myself. It's like, well, okay, that's cool, but then if that's the case, you can't have these expectations that everyone's going to adopt your style.
It's like, no, you're lazy, dude.
But
those are my words then.
But also what I saw in art school, and art teachers might be different than math teachers in that it's more of a subjective realm, where there could be multiple answers to one question. But if one of my art teachers, and here's a lesson, kids, anyone who might be in art school right now, if your teacher shows you their work, that's what appeals to their sensibilities. That's what they like to see. So there's a bit of a skill in making your work look like something they would have done. Again, you have to be careful not to compromise your own artistic integrity, but you have to kind of get a sense of like, oh, this person likes a real loose painterly feel, or this person's an illustrator and they work in graphite and it's a super tight, clean, detailed kind of thing.
Yeah.
So also one of my art teachers, he would not let us do anything that had that did not have an explanation for it. But we were also not allowed to do anything predictable, symmetric, balanced, any of these kind of things. So it was this like very mind-bending like sense of like rules-based abstraction. But that did a lot for me in the sense coming down later of like have a reason for everything that you're doing, being able to explain it, even when it comes down to songwriting,
at least having like a method behind the madness, Right.
But knowing like, well, I do need to tailor this to suit, my audience, or, in my case, it was the teacher, or like what we do in my day job. It's like, well, who's the audience for this? And we need to make sure we're speaking to that audience. What do they value, and how do we connect our value to them? Mm-hmm. So it's the same with, music too. It's like, well, who's listening to my music? What are they going through? What's going to sympathize? How are they going to feel what I'm feeling? Because you could just scream into a microphone and shame anybody who doesn't care to understand it. But it's
exactly.
Like, no, you have a message and you want to deliver it in a way that is going to connect with somebody, that they're going to go, you know what? I know how that guy feels. And I appreciate somebody, feeling the same thing I'm feeling.
Yeah. The way I always see it is like, you got to know the rules in order to break them or bend them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like a lot of the new music that we're writing, there's one song in particular. It's like say it's like an E minor scale, but I'm going like E to E flat to G to a D major. So it's like the chords are kind of weird. And then I'm adding like some dissonance and stuff like that in like the overdubs that I'm doing. And I'm like, it works though. Right. Like, and so like conventionally, I like, if I was playing by the book, by the rules, I'm like, this wouldn't work. It's like, especially doing like quote unquote, like, if you're doing like diminished chords and stuff like that, those aren't technically part of the scale, but they work. Or like harmonic minors and stuff,
Going back to appeal, comprehension, and retention, that doesn't always mean playing by the rules, but there still needs to be a context. So in a lot of cases, looking at some music, breaking it down, it's like, within a song, they'll create a rule, and then at some point they'll break it, and that's what makes it sound interesting, and that's what makes something memorable and understandable. Is like, there's some music where you can listen to the intro, verse, and chorus, and you might as well just skip it because you've heard the rest of this. They're just going to repeat that 4 times,
Yeah. There's nothing new here. Yeah.
Right.
That's totally exactly like what I think with music. I'm like, okay, you got to try, and now that we're getting, more competent in our instruments, I want to say, like, compared to like when we were like 18, 16 years old, I'm like, oh, let's be dangerous. Let's be weird. Let's just not, like, we're working on something now that's more of like a power pop kind of thing. And we have no intention of like making it a very punk song, but I'm like, oh yeah, let's just do this. I'm like, oh, it's a kind of a slower groove, and I'm like, whatever. We're just kind of like 3 dudes just jamming it out, and I'm like, to me, this is fun. I don't care. Let's keep it weird. Let's keep it like different. I'm like, and shake us up, because I'm like, oh, we're always gonna try and jump to the same type of like breakdown. I'm like, oh, we're gonna halftime this thing, and then I was like telling the guys, I'm like, this is what we want to do. Stop going there.
It's got to be so tough for bands. And it's the same with, you look at like guitar brands too. You could say this similar argument for like, let's call Fender and Gibson, for example, where it's like, there are probably people there that want to innovate. They want to come up with something new, but is that what the people actually want? And when you look at bands, it's like their first album, second album, they created a presence for themselves that people latched onto. And it's like, these people are creative, and they are ebbing and flowing as circumstances and life and all this happens. And maybe they want to do a mellow album. Maybe they want to do a more aggressive thing. It's like, then the fans reject it because it's like, this is different. This isn't what I expected. Just play the hits, and it's almost like you can be forced into a rut, trying to serve like, well, this is what the people want, so let's just keep giving it to them. And then you just do the same thing over and over and over again. And then people criticize you for that. It's like, well, this is just the same thing over and over. It's like, well, do you want anything different or not? So that's got to be tough. Like,
Yeah.
as a band.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like with like the different bands, like the creativity changes because maybe like what is going on in their lives changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I'm like, oh God, my dog is just barking. I don't know if you can hear it.
That's cool. It doesn't bother me.
Like, I'll try and gate it out with my dog. Every time, like, if there's somebody at the door, he's like, I'm going to let everybody in the whole neighborhood know.
No, but I mean, that's like what we're talking about, though. That's the kind of imperfection that, even just to a show. Like, how many podcasts we listen to where, somebody opens a door or a dog barks and you're like, oh, darn it, I'm going to edit that out. It's like, no, we enjoy that because that's what reminds us that this is just people talking.
Yeah. It makes it real. But I think one thing I wanted to mention, just like, people's, what inspires them changes. So it's like maybe now that they're more successful, they kind of changes. So they're like, oh yeah, I'm writing different songs. I'm like, oh yeah, you're not hurting and broke anymore. So maybe I don't want to listen to you anymore. And it changes. That's fine. There's an audience for everybody. One thing I wanted to touch on was you were saying retention of like your 3 rules or whatever, or shit, what the hell were they?
It.
Was it like retention?
It's ironic.
See, I already forgot it, but the retention thing was like, I'll write something and I'll just start jamming things out. And a thing that I like to do is I don't write it down first. Good. Because if I remember it, then it's worth a damn. If I come back to it like 2 or 3 days later and I still remember it, especially for a guitar, then I will know that it's worth something. But if I forget it, then I'm like, okay, cool. I'll tap into it later or not. And if I don't, then I don't. If I do, then I do. So that's like
funny how that.
Yeah.
It's funny how that correlates with simplicity. Some of the most like memorable, I guess anything, quotes or songs or whatever are usually on the simple side. Mm-hmm. That's what makes them easy to remember. So it's not a matter of it being, boring or basic or plain, but just that it's, carefully chosen, accessible, parts like a guitar riff. I think in a weird way, we are drawn to perfection and complexity, but something that is maybe perfectly symmetrical, a painting or a sculpture or something. For example, you look at one side, you've already seen the other. There's really no need to move around within the thing. And maybe that's the memorable component was that, I saw it and it was cool. But that irregularity, that asymmetry, that imperfection is also, we don't always realize what draws us in. Like my wife being a photographer, her favorite thing is to document families, and the photos that people are drawn to are the ones where it's like, something is going wrong, that this person's not looking at the camera, or, what would be considered not the perfect shot. Not everything is clean and wonderful, but that's where all the actual realism is. And so as far as making it memorable and working on that retention aspect, I think kind of drawing somebody in and giving them something that is simple and accessible helps them retain it.
Yeah, something that they can like take away,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of really, I don't know, I guess that was kind of it. I think we tackled that one. Cool. We ran that one. That was good. Cool. Well, how about before we head out of here, do you want to let people know where they can find you? Where's the best place to find out what's going on with Kevin? What's up with the Equitz?
Just any of the social feeds, Instagram and Facebook mostly. There's a Facebook group for, a Facebook page for Equitz Guitars. But whenever I post something, I post it to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you're a Twitter person, if you're a Facebook person, you can follow on there. Instagram, everything is Equitz Guitars. So it's
makes it easy.
Pretty simple to find. There is a website that has like a contact form if you want to email me. But as far as guitars and all that, it's more of a and I need to update it actually, but it's more of like a library of ones that have been finished. Stuff that's in progress, like any progress photos, those are on the live feeds. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time and doing this.
Yeah, this is fun, man. Yeah, thanks for reaching out.
It's always good to get a different side of you. I just I think a good bit of gabbing is always, it's always fun. And
That's
so yeah, check Kevin out, and hopefully we'll get you in for a proper episode, Kyle Bryan style.
yeah. Hopefully, it would be upon the delivery of your guitar.
Yeah,
if I can. My preference is to deliver them in person, just because I want to see the person play. I mean, selfishly, it's great to see them open the case and see the guitar for the first time, but also, to like sit down and play it, and if it needs like higher action or anything like that, to be able to make those adjustments right then and there. But yeah, maybe we could line that up to when I drop it off, and we could throw down.
Yeah, it'll be cool. So. But yeah, no, thanks so much again, and be sure to check Kevin out on all the social medias and all the good shit he's got going on. Before I close this out here, I just want to say thank you guys for tuning into the show, and if you guys, want to be a part of what we got going on, you guys can follow along on Instagram at The Tone Jerks, and check us out on our Facebook group. Just search The Tone Jerks and you'll find it. And if you guys do like what you hear, or if you don't, you guys can leave a review on iTunes. Hopefully it's 5 stars, but even if it's not, your reviews, if you write something, we're going to read it on the air. We got a couple that we got recently, but I'm going to wait until my brother Kyle is here, and we're going to read them on the air. And if you guys really like what you hear, you guys can help support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. But if you guys double down to $2 a month, you guys get an extra episode every week. And at $5 a month, you guys get a discount on shirts, and we will send you some Playing Without a Pilot merch, because we don't really have any Tone Jerk stuff right now. So just as a quick thank you, I wanted to give a shout out to all of our supporters. We have Co and Paul from the Flippin' Flippers podcast. We have Abe Newman. We have Michael Newman. We have Andrew Walsh. We have Will Lehue. We have Bruce Banana. We have Doug Christ, Doug Gann, Jamie Davis, Jason Fuzzmonger, Adam Rohr, from the Let 'Em Hear podcast. We have Jimmy Bowers. We have Johnny Ray. We have Doug King. We have Joseph from Like My Pedals. We have Leon Wright from Pelican Noiseworks. And then we have Digger from Fat Foot Effects. And this is the last week of that pedal contest that we're doing on Instagram. We're giving away Fat Foot Effects pedal. It's a boost and drive all in one. Some really cool artwork, and then go check out our Instagram for all the details. You got to like repost some shit, tag some friends, the normal Instagram contest type shit. And then we have Sean Arbo from Gun Street Wiring Shop. He's out there hanging out with Kyle, and I'm a little jealous. And then lastly, but not leastly, we have a new one, Steve Mike from a local band here in San Diego, Hardly Human. Yeah, he has joined us on Patreon. I think that's really cool. Local support is cool. Kind of, you put this out there, you don't know who's going to listen, and the fact that local bands that we play out with and that we watch are listening to the show and are into it enough to support us. All right, I'm just rambling on here by myself, like a crazy person. But Kyle's going to be back next week. He's going to have a bunch of stories to tell. We will see ya. We love ya. Bye.